So I don't introduce the argument because it will explain itself in the middle of the conversation. Let's start with a question. What do you think all these things have in common?
Spiral, a circle.
Well, in a way, you're right. But to answer, we will dig a little into math.
Oh my god.
Thanks for the questions. Okay, let's start talking about the Fibonacci sequence. Leonardo Fibonacci was an Italian mathematician who lived in the 12th century, and among other kind of reflections and interesting things he discovered, he introduced the sequence of numbers that you see here. So 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on. The 2 is found by adding the 2 numbers before it, 1 plus 1. The 3 is found by adding 2 plus 1. The 5 is 2 plus 3. Okay, I think you get it. Every number is the sum of the preceding 2. Let's talk also about phi. It's not just a Greek letter, it's a number which has some interesting characteristics. It's the so-called divine proportion or golden ratio. That is, if we take a segment and then divide it into 2 segments, A and B, the divine proportion of that segment is that the segment that respects this mathematical relation, which is A plus B is to A as A is to B. Okay? Which means that this one respect to this is exactly as much as this one respect to this, which is the number phi, which means 1.61, etc. If we use the two these dimensions as sides of a rectangle, and then we subtract the square of side A, we find another rectangle which has the same proportions as this one. This kind of rectangle is called golden rectangle. And also the same proportion is found in this, which is not a satanic symbol, it's just a pentagon, a regular pentagon, and a star built around a regular pentagon. Here we can find the divine proportion between this and this segment, this blue segment and the green one, and also the green and the red one. But also, all these things just to introduce the argument. Some boring facts about this number. This is the formula to calculate it, but also this is an interesting property. If we square the number, we obtain the same number plus 1. And if we calculate the inverse number, which is 1 divided by phi, it's exactly equal to phi minus 1. Mathematical consideration. And also it can be expressed as the continued fraction, which is this kind of number, 1 divided by 1 plus 1 divided by 1, and etc. And also another interesting formula, square root of 1 plus square root of 1 plus etc. Just nerd stuff. This makes phi the most irrational among all irrational numbers. That is to say, you cannot express it with a fraction, and so it has infinite digits after the point. Okay, what does relate the two things, the Fibonacci series and phi? The ratio of two consecutive Fibonacci numbers tends to phi. The more we go on with the series, the more we approximate phi more and more exactly. This is another of the boring characteristics. But where do we find it? For example, in flower petals. We find that every flower has a number of petals which is always a Fibonacci number. For example, daisies, which are two kinds of, which have two possible numbers of petals, have 21 or 34 petals. And also a number of other flowers which have 1, 2, 3, 5 or 8 petals. And also the seeds on the flower heads. This is a daisy again, but also the sunflower as an example of two number of spirals of seeds which are Fibonacci numbers, 21 and 34. If you have a larger one, because this is a daisy and it's relatively small, but if you have a large sunflower, you will find Fibonacci numbers of a greater order. For example, 88, I think. And also the tree branches. This is just a drawing, but in reality you find that the number of branches that you find in a section of a tree is always a Fibonacci number of branches. If you graphically put together squares which have a side which is a Fibonacci number, you obtain this spiral, which has two small squares of one side 1, then a square of side 2, then 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on. They grow, making a spiral. But it's not just a spiral. It's a particular type of spiral called logarithmic, after the equation that defines it. And it's also called spira mirabilis because it's related to the divine proportion. It has been first described by Descartes in, I think, 17th century, and then studied by Jacob Bernoulli, or Bernoulli. You can find it in various places. Let's see some of them. The Nautilus, not that one, this one. One interesting thing about this spiral is that if you divide this segment by this, or the opposite, you find phi. You also find it in some vegetables and plants. For example, the Romanesco broccoli, and also the cactus, and the pine cones, and a series of other plants. And also, the same spiral is found in the same flower that I mentioned before. You have two series of opposite spirals, one facing left or clockwise, and one facing counterclockwise. But they are always spira mirabilis. And also, since it has an interesting characteristics that it is making always the same angle with the segment going to its focus, it's also the path followed by a hawk toward its prey. It allows, for an important thing, that is, it allows the hawk not to turn its head to see, because hawk's eyes are not facing forward, they are facing sideways. So this way, a hawk is much faster in going to its prey, because it doesn't have to turn its head left or right. You also find it in seahorses and animal horns. Here we have my favorite artist, Salvador Dalí, facing a rhinoceros. And also in larger phenomena, like cyclones, and even larger galaxies. Lastly, you find it in a number of masterpieces of all times, starting from Leonardo, Michelangelo and Botticelli, and then going up to Salvador Dali's paintings. Okay, that's all. If you like, you also have credits for the images.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Okay.
That was really interesting.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of that at all. I kept thinking that maybe like the only thing that they had in common was that everything was like a living organism or something, but not that it was all came
I
down.
took the galaxy for that. Okay. So I hope you didn't get
Some
bored.
slides were a little bit difficult to
Yeah.
catch.
Tricky.
The mathematical ones.
I didn't follow you
Well, I went
for
for
that.
I went fast about
the
it.
pictures and the concept was very, very nice and funny.
Does anyone have any
And
questions?
interesting.
No questions at all.